That's a pretty cool shirt you got. Want me to sign it?
Oh, how awful. Did he at least die painlessly? To shreds, you say? Well, how is his wife holding up? To shreds, you say?
So I just saw Smile 2 and it was dumb. This is easily one of the most forgettable horror films probably in this Halloween release season. I am severely disappointed even though I wasn't expecting much. I mean, I am sort of a fan of the first one, but really I enjoy more so the short film that kind of was the reason why the first film was made in the first place, because that short film was actually genuinely terrifying and I kind of liked the locked room situation. But when it came to the feature film, there were a lot of aspects that I thought were hit or miss, and not all of it flowed or was genuinely terrifying compared to that first short film that I watched. So overall, I was kind of like, it was a pass. It's okay. It's sort of interesting for a horror film and a horror premise. Personally, I think It Follows did a better job, but whatever. Smile 1, it was okay. Smile 2, however, is sort of just the same thing, but worse. Now, I'll get into some spoilers a little bit later on, but overall, the only good stuff from this film are some decent filmmaking in certain sections. Emphasis on certain sections. There are some nice shot choices. There's a nice one-taker in the beginning. There's some moments where you can see like, oh, the director has done something really interesting here. He's chosen to, do a zoom in on a mirror and then show two characters talking, and then they leave and still hold that shot together, and there's no need for two cuts, which is great. I love that. That is the better parts about this movie. And likewise, there's also some good music and some okayish performances, and they sort of try to raise an interesting idea, but they don't really get into more about the spirit and how to do so, and it's also really dumb, and it kind of leads me into going into spoiler territory. So if you don't want any spoilers, pause it here, come back and listen to these thoughts. But overall, this is a film that I think is a letdown compared to the first one, and maybe just in general when it comes to horror films. Okay, so spoiler territory now. Like I said, the good stuff from this movie is the decent filmmaking, and it is with the shot choices. I mentioned that there is some good music, particularly the forebodingness. The opening is fairly strong. It's probably one of my favorite sequences in the film up until a point, and I'll get to that later on. I think the main character was fine in terms of performances, but really there is only one guy in this whole movie that I genuinely believed was the best, and that is the character Lewis, who genuinely looked like a believable guy in terms of someone who's completely tweaking out and then who then suddenly changes into this evil, menacing looking spirit. Like, his smile is the best out of them all, hands down. And like I said in the intro, they sort of try to raise an interesting idea about how to get rid of the spirit by, thinking about trying to kill the host so that the parasite can't latch on and continue to grow. But then that doesn't really make sense, and I'll get to that later on, but at least they tried to do something a little bit different compared to the first one. And then the ending of this film sort of pays off if you think about it, but it's also just really stupid, even if it's meant to be something that's really scary. So as much as I think the opening was nicely shot and it began somewhat strong, it was just stupidly flawed by the character's decisions. For example, why is he threatening to kind of hold him at gunpoint and he's got that gangster? There is no need to then stab him and then kind of stab him like in a really aggressive, almost gross manner, to then allow more time so that then his brother is going to obviously pick up the gun and then aim at you and try and shoot you, and then you have to then, I guess, defend yourself, and then you shoot back at him, and then that kind of ends up injuring him and kills him, and then your whole plan is just like out the window. And I'm like, Joel, what the F are you doing? Like, this is like the dumbest thing. Like, there is no need to just shoot him. Isn't that like, that's the whole point of what you wanted to do? Like, why do you need to go to that extreme and add such unnecessary risk? I just don't get it. Also, why did he leave it to the last day? Why couldn't Joel have done something earlier, like the 6th day? Like, could you have not, how long you've been planning this? Like, could you have not find someone else to do so? Even like maybe a different kind of gangster? Like, I get the whole, it's a smart plan, you shoot someone that, deserves it and like give the curse to terrible people. Like, that's great. Like, that's a great way to do it. But the execution to me was like, you would have to do like the last minute. And I'm like, huh? What happens if you shoot at the gangsters and then like the ones that came and discovered him, and then if you kill one of them but the other one survives, is that them being technically a witness to your murder of that person and then you're all good? Or do you have to just run inside and run away like nothing is happening, or like you just forget about the plan because you already have a witness in that other guy, Lewis? As much as it's kind of shocking to kill him off so early, I feel like his character could still have been more interesting to bring up later on, as this sort of detective who's trying to help bring justice to his ex-girlfriend and help the singer, Sky, in this movie. Did you really have to kill him off just because of the shock value for it? Because then you are really sort of starting again from scratch, in that now you have to make us like this new character, Sky Riley, and she has to be sort of lovable. And then there's this whole issue with her where it's like, is it kind of like someone that we can sympathize with? Like, I get it, she's, a famous pop star and she's got issues and trauma, but why do we need to have her be this kind of character in the first place? Like, why does she have to be a pop star? Is it something about the struggle with fame and how that brings so much pressure and attention to that job, but that she's also human and she feels guilty for the car accident and maybe is not pushed into a life that she didn't want because of her over-controlling mother? So we then sympathize with her because she's been through a lot, and then that plays into later on why people in the movie think she's going crazy and that she's just imagining things because she's under a lot of pressure, and then to us we really know that she's actually going crazy because there's this demon spirit that's after her. I'm like is that whole like saga necessary? Like, does she have to be a pop star? And couldn't you just make it about just some person that was just struggling and felt pressured into work, or that was some addict, someone that's an alcoholic or something, or even someone that's just like a petty criminal who's stuck inside doing petty crimes because they're poor, and then they witness this murder because Joel killed this other gangster, and there's this young kid who's like, oh, I shouldn't even be here. And I would feel way more sympathetic towards this young kid who's caught up with the wrong crowd, as opposed to this pop star who kind of initially is like introduced as someone who is sort of not really caring about people, or just doesn't like the world that she's in. She doesn't like the industry, but deep down she's a good person, and she has come from something obviously good that's been corrupted by the business. It's like, man, it just gets whole murky, and it's like, to me it's like too much and almost unnecessary. And because of all of that musical kind of element towards it, there's all these scenes of like her doing rehearsals and then doing like a dance studio sequence, and then her playing a song in like the concert rehearsal, and it's like goes on for way too long. Like, what is going, like, what are we watching here? Is this a horror movie? Or it's sometimes like it goes into a musical. You could have easily just cut out 30 to 45 minutes of this. This film has no right in being over 2 hours long, and it's because of stuff like this that's just like, it's so unnecessary. There was even just one scene where she was actually playing on the piano, and it was probably the best song out of the whole movie, and I was actually getting to enjoy it, and then it cut because we needed to go to a jump horror scare. But all the other ones, like the second major dance sequence where it's all in a costume, and then you see Jack Nicholson's son come up, like that took way too long. It's so unnecessary to be that extended of a dance sequence. With that, I think there's some point there's just too many hallucinations and like too many scenes where like, okay, is this real? No, this isn't real. No, it's Gemma. No, she's not real. She's calling you. No, they're in the freezer. No, that's not real. Yep, they're in that home. The dance sequence, like, okay, it's a twist. Like, this isn't real, and then this isn't real, and then this isn't real. Like, we get it. It's kind of bordering on like too many times it's happening. It's too much. It kind of defeats the purpose. And coming to this, introducing this new idea of how to get rid of the spirit by then saying that we need to kill the host, and that the whole idea of killing Sky and then reviving her like 8 minutes later. It's sort of interesting to begin with, but then it's just such a dumb dumb plan. Like, I don't get, like, how does dying and then coming back actually not negate the effects of dying? Like, wouldn't the parasite demon still be clever enough to still be around after that? But I guess it's worth a shot. I'm going to try something new. I don't get if this idea kind of would have worked in the beginning where, you know, Joel killed the person in front of his brother and then the brother died, and like, well, does that mean that witness then died and the curse stops? Or was it because Lewis was there to see things going down that then helped carry the spirit demon along because he was able to pass it on? Okay, like, it gets a bit murky again. And even as much as it was a dumb plan, I still would have liked to see something different, like show us her flatlining and do the procedure and then maybe introduce something more to the world. Like, what if she saw stuff in the darkness, you know, something that could be a little bit like unique and different and, you know, at least somewhat interesting. That could have been something as part of this whole, you know, movie, even though it was a dumb plan, but it's something new, at least. New, but dumb, whatever. And then I'm just kind of confused, like, what new stuff was introduced in general, because reading, you know, the production notes and you know, the aspirations of the writer-director Parker Finn, who said that there's still a lot of interesting stuff to explore in the world of Smile, and I don't want to make sure that there's a new, exciting, fresh way into it that the audience isn't anticipating. Like, what was interesting and new in here? I don't get what he actually added into it. I know that he wants to keep the backstory of the entity and maybe it's like how it came about, you know, its nature, and you keep that mysterious. Like, fine, but you don't have to go into that element, explain it, but like, can you not show us a little bit, you know, more thought into maybe how to kill it or how it can affect people differently? I think also even some of the deaths that do come about, like, that's the chance to be unique and creative. Like, having someone just stab themselves with a piece of shard glass from a mirror is like, it feels like average. And I'm sorry if I'm desensitized to horror, but like, that to me is less cringier than her trying to take out this needle from her arm in the hospital. Like, that actually was way more, you know, gross and scary, and I could feel people like even cringing when they're seeing this needle and her trying to rip it out. But then like watching the mum kind of like just stab herself in the eye was like nothing. I think even like Lewis's getting a weight and smacking it in the head was okay-ish. Like, you get to see a little bit of a gore, but to me, the first Terrifier film had this amazing death and a way more gorier scene than this whole complete Smile franchise. So I don't get what's happened that's been so new, and I would have loved to have seen something more, you know, interesting and bigger in terms of deaths from a production standpoint, especially with the sequel. And I don't get the whole subtle message of the movie or these movies in general. Like, is it about how to save yourself? You have to spread violence by killing someone, which then takes the virus away from you, and then that passes it on to someone else, and that's maybe saying how our society runs, like we thrive off violence towards each other? Or is it actually just something about how suicide or depression spreads when we see it in others and hold on to it, but if we don't see it, then it's okay and the virus won't, you know, be passed on? Or am I just like reading way too much into that in general and there's no subtle message at all? Just forget about it and focus on how interesting / difficult it is to kill this thing. Like, okay, whatever. The CGI creature at the end just looked bad. Like, it looked so much better in the first one, and I don't know what happened in this film. Like, maybe the choice to have it be on stage and you can't make the environment dark around you, so that to do the creature with its CGI and production, it stands out more and looks kind of way worse compared to the first film where it looked terrifying. And maybe because the setting of it was in this kind of darker room, and it's just, you know, able to kind of mask a lot more features of itself, because man, oh man, when you see it come out on stage, you're like, huh? I don't get any of the other Smiles in the film. Like, most of them were just comical. The little girl who looked like Darla from Finding Nemo was the absolute worst one of them. Just didn't find her scary at all. I thought it was hilarious. I was chuckling at myself. I don't get what was happening. I also would like to know, what is everyone else seeing when that girl goes up to her? Like, maybe just have like a shot or two that sees it from everyone else's perspective. Like, is this girl just talking, or is everyone just cool with her just smiling? Like, is something going on? I just would love to see just a little insert shot keep it there. Even Jack Nicholson's son, his smile was okay, but it looked more funny than scary. I think I enjoyed seeing the poster of him. That looked generally more terrifying. And when I compare it to something, like I see in The Shining with Jack Nicholson, there's obviously that resemblance, but when Jack Nicholson's doing that kind of face, it looks genuinely more bizarre and strange and crazy. He is doing that smiling face, and sometimes it is kind of comical and it kind of looks funny, but then there's also anger and there's craziness, and he changes his expression, his frustration, and his dialogue adds just so much to the overall picture that it's not just completely something comical, it's wild and just batshit crazy. And that's what the whole film The Shining is about. And even if you think it's funny, he switches it up and goes back to being crazy and so strange that it's genuinely terrifying. So here, when I see it in Smile, his son, like he's just walking upstage. He's walking to her and he's just smiling. I'm just like, this is kind of like borderline hilarious right now. And like Lewis was the only one who nailed it. He kind of just like had this perfect expression where it was like a menacing smile. He was genuinely disturbed and he looked crazy in those eyes, and like he to me nailed it the most out of everyone else. And I think that's one of my issues with the first film, where it's very hit or miss. Does the smile actually freak you out, or is it just something that's just stupid? The interpretive dancers smiling in this film, there's a sequence where there's like 10-20 of them and they're all coming out and they're just doing this interpretive kind of dance and they're like smiling and crawling. I was laughing the whole time. That to me was just not scary in the slightest, and their faces were like, it just looked like an interpretive dance. To me, it was hilarious. Also, why does no one seem to put on their lights in this movie? Like, have a reason for why the lights are being turned off. Like, half the time she's in this expensive apartment in complete darkness. I don't get it. Like, there was one moment where like, she turned on the lights and then the entity turned it off. Cool. Have that. But for her to just be like, ruminating in darkness, it's just so stupid to me. I don't get it. I hate it. And even like the guy with Morris with the freezer made a comment of like, yeah, I haven't had time to get the lights on. I'm like, okay, like I know he's not maybe real, but it's just stupid. And like, I'm like, people are just groaning. And like when he mentioned that the freezer door, the latch isn't working, and we have to, use this brick because be careful, it's going to close in on yourself and you might be stuck. I'm like, of course, how convenient. That is it in a nutshell. This film is stinky. It is borderline forgettable. There are some jump scares which felt irritating because they're only really scary because they're loud and big and will just catch you off guard. But other than that, there is really nothing to it. It feels like a wasted opportunity because there were some good moments and they had some good filmmaking, good directing choices where thought was put into it, care was done in terms of the way the cinematography was done and shot. But for whatever reason, it gets wasted on a dumb script. Waste of time.
Attention, New Yorkers!